Right, here we go. Another short story from me, Patch. I know they're crap, but hey, let's have a look. Someone told me they might be a bit long, but we'll see. This one's called He's Out There Somewhere. Billy grew up in a rough area. He was bullied early in his life, but both factors had toughened him up in many ways. Now he was a young adult of 19 years. He lived with his mum and younger brother Chris. His father had fled the family whilst Billy was only 6 years of age, and Chris was only in his nappies. His mother, often battered and bruised, still wanted him home, even though he was a total waste of space and horrendously abusive to her. She had never seen him raise his hands to the kids, but he was verbally abusive to them. It's strange how the abused still cling on to their abusers. But now Greg has been gone for 13 years. His wife would occasionally catch sight of him in the local pub, often with some female drunkenly hanging off his arm. But times move on, and Debbie had met someone, and for the area, he was what you'd call a catch. Stephen worked at the local scrapyard, a hard-working man with good morals. He had been married, but his wife had died in a hit-and-run accident 5 years earlier. They had no children. Billy liked his new dad. They'd go fishing together, and sometimes go to the local football game. But that came to a sudden and dramatic end one fateful Sunday afternoon. It was a bright, warm Sunday morning on a June day, and Billy pulled his curtains open and leaned on the windowsill and peered out. Outside were a dozen or so council houses in this typical run-down estate. An old Ford Mondeo was on jacks. England flags limped in the warm breeze from windows. Broken fence panels creaked and banged slowly, pulling away from the posts. Billy had dreamt about getting away from here for years. He wanted to live somewhere where he could go to bed and sleep instead of hearing drunks singing as they made their way back from the pub. Next door, booming music vibrating through the walls and dogs barking at all hours through the night. But this dream had been hanging. No. This dream he had been having had lasted for about 5 years, and he still hadn't done anything about it. He knew his mum and brother were happy. Now Stephen was around. I can't read my own book, but he still felt something was missing. There must be something better. There has to be, he muttered as he saw an old man sitting on his doorstep smoking. At that moment he made a decision. That's it. I'm going to leave and see if I make a go of it in another city, he shouted and jumped to his feet. Oh, Christ. He grabbed a suitcase from his mum's room and he filled it with his most precious belongings and clothes. He got in the shower and had a refreshing clean-up and put on his clothes. He then marched downstairs in a very upbeat state of mind. As he entered the living room, he dropped the case to the ground. His mother and Stephen both lay on the floor. They had both been stabbed numerous times through the chest and neck. Blood was still flowing a crimson river across the floor. Billy fell to his knees in complete grief. He held his face in his hands and sobbed. As he pulled his hands away, he turned to the kitchen and he could hear a gargling sound. He stood up and entered the room. Inside was his 15-year-old brother. He was hanging from his neck. A long electric flex was constricting into his neck. His eyes were bloodshot. Billy quickly grabbed his brother's legs to take the weight. It was no good. He heard his brother groan. Once more, and then silence. And that Sunday morning, his family were no more. In an instant, he was alone. He managed to grab a knife from the drawer and cut his dead brother from the ceiling joist, and he landed on top of him as he did so. Billy had his dead brother's blood-filled eyes staring down at him as he frantically pushed him off. This traumatic morning had an enormous effect on young Billy. "I'm coming for you, Dad. It has to be you. You did this. You never wanted us to be happy. I'm coming for you." Billy put the largest knife in his breast pocket and walked outside. He entered the King's Head pub and looked around. "Where's me old man?" he asked the barman. Everyone in the area knew Billy's dad. He had quite a reputation. "He's not been in today, Billy," the man answered. Billy gave the barman a hardened stare and left the pub. He stood there looking across the road, thinking where to go next. He had heard rumours that his father had been sleeping around a woman's house on Park Lane, so he began to walk there. The clouds broke. Some sunlight shone down on Billy, but nothing would lighten his mood. He entered Park Lane, and soon he came to number 9, and he flapped at the letterbox. About 30 seconds passed, and then a boy of about 8 opened the door. "Hello, who are you?" he asked. "A friend," Billy answered. "Who else is home?" "My mum's in her room with Uncle Ernie," he replied. Billy gently pushed the boy to one side and began to climb the stairs. He got to the landing and looked around the bathroom, the boy's room, and another door, which was closed. He approached it and put his ear to the surface. He could make out what sounded like sexual noises. He pulled away and slammed his shoulder at the door. The door flew open with force. He looked across the room and stared at the couple. His dad was on his back and the whore was on top of him. Billy pulled the blade from his breast pocket and ran forward. First the blade sunk into the back of the woman. The knife was stuck between the shoulder blades. The woman fell sideways, injuring his father's penis as she fell. She screamed in pain and he grabbed his manhood. Son, please don't," he begged. "You bastard! You killed Mum and my brother." He pulled the knife from the body in a quick motion. His dad screamed, I didn't do it, boy." It was too late. Billy slammed the blade down. It pierced the right hand of his dad as it sunk deep into his eye socket. It almost looked as if his dad was holding his hand over his own eye, as if he had a headache. The man fell forward. The handle of the knife hit the bed, and the force pushed the blade through the back of his skull. Some brain oozed out onto the duvet. "Fuck you," Billy screamed, and turned and left. As he walked downstairs, the boy ran up past him, finding the horrific mess. Billy returned home to his own house of death. He poured petrol around and set the house alight. He left and caught the next bus. He travelled as far as his money would take him. That night he stayed in a cheap B&B. He awoke to the birds singing outside. He flicked on the television. The newsreader said there had been 4 murders and a man had confessed to the killings. Billy sat up straight. He had murdered his father and lover, and they were innocent. Billy screamed a bloody, curdling cry. The end.